Hello, true duelists. It's YGO Strat's Yu-Gi-Oh! Single Card History, where I'm going to be talking about some of the cards that have impacted Yu-Gi-Oh! Throughout the years, and some of the other ones that didn't. Today's card, Konami's officially printed Nightmare Blunt rotation, Noble Knights of the Round Table. Noble Knights of the Round Table was first released in Primal Origin as an ultra-rare card in 2014. Notable reprints to date include 2014's Noble Knights of the Round Table box set, the abomination of a product that Konami used to introduce us to Platinum Rares, which is relevant because that's the rarity that this card came in. It was a Platinum Rare and it was very ugly. It also got an ultra rare reprint in the 2015 Megatons, and most recently as I make this video, it got a rare print in the 2020 Maximum Gold set. It's never been on the ban list because why would it ever be? A field spell card, its effect reads: during your end phase, you can activate each of these effects up to once per turn, depending on the total number of Noble Knight cards with different names in your graveyard and or you control. 3 or more, send 1 Noble Knight card from your deck to the graveyard. 6 or more, special summon 1 Noble Knight monster from your hand, then you can equip 1 Noble Arms equip spell from your hand to that monster. 9 or more, target 1 Noble Knight monster in your graveyard, add that target to your hand. 12 or more, draw 1 card. Would you look at that? A useless mess of a card, and I'm gonna waste some time bitching about it. I have so much to say, I'm not even quite sure where to start. As is always important, we should look at this card in the context of when it was released. And when it was released, there were 15 Noble Knight monsters in total. So you could resolve each of these effects, but that did not make all the knights playable. There are very few archetypes with 15 playable monsters, and Noble Knight is most certainly not one of them, and most certainly was not the case to be in 2014, especially when one of these 15 Noble Knights is Noble Knight Joan, which is a Noble Knight in name only, and is bad even by 2014 standards. This also includes the deck's vanilla of Artorigus and Peridor, whose effect is a neg1 on advantage technically, and I really bring up just to say that you're running tight on names here just to be able to use this field spell's effects. And even then, you'll have to make all of the available extra deck monsters in a duel to really get full use of this card. And let's take a closer look at those effects, and just how little it is they do for each other. The one you'll be using most reliably is obviously the first, requiring the least number of knights to send a Noble Knight card from your deck to the graveyard. It's not a terrible effect, except for the fact that this is taking place in your end phase, but it's also not an exceptional one either. There are 2 level 5s in the deck, one being Black Lancelin, which I've probably said wrong and feels kind of weird to say, I won't lie, but it's a monster that can summon itself from the grave when you're too bricked up on too many Noble Knights and not enough equip spells. And Iktar, this guy, is one who summons himself out from the grave as well, but to do so will require banishing 2 Noble Knights from the grave. So not only will it need further setup, but also it'll hinder your round table even more. Nice. Other than these 2, none of the Noble Knights have effects that really want them to be in the grave, or at least not as much as you'd wish you were sending a Noble Arms equip spell instead. Meanwhile, if you get up to 6 names, the card shifts, with it then summoning a Noble Knight from your hand only, and equipping it with a Noble Arm equip spell, again from your hand only. Imagine if you could summon, say, a Noble Knight from the graveyard with this effect. I guess that would make too much sense, and Konami isn't here to do that because they are only here to make dollars. It's an interesting effect because it implies you opened a Noble Knight and a Noble Arm, which was the deck's biggest weakness on release. The deck had a pseudo-monarch problem, but instead of the ratios being tribute to tribute fodder, this needed knights and swords. All the best knights needed swords to get their effects, and those effects are almost all entirely activated during your main phase. The exact exception to this would be if you had a copy of Dristan and a sword, and then in the end phase you could pop an opponent's monster, assuming you didn't just do that in the first place. This one is wild to me, especially in the context of 2014 Noble Knights, because it assumes that you opened 2 knights and 2 equips, used one and did your plays, and then wanted to put a Noble Knight on board as just a plug to help swarm in the end phase? It doesn't even work with Brothers Effect to Recycle, because that needs to be a normal summon. It's just a best case scenario hope you can sort of effect, and it's a reward for the mid game because you're not getting it off turn 1 since you need 6 knights in the grave and or on the field. And then if you get 9 knights in the grave or on your field, you finally get to an effect that works with another effect on this card. For the low cost of having 9 differently named Noble Knights been played and somehow you haven't either won or lost already, you can grab a Noble Knight from your graveyard and add it to your hand. This does pair well with the first effect, But again, we run into the issue that it's taking place in the end phase. At the end of your turn, you can Foolish a Knight and add it to your hand. Wow, crazy. What knight could you possibly want that isn't one of the 9 you've already had access to even get to be able to use this effect? And you know what? Yes, this does technically work with the 6 effect, but unless you also have a sword still kicking around, you're not getting a meaningful summon off of it. You're just putting a vanilla on the board. Even if you use it to summon at the level 5s for free, they each have a 2000 as their highest stat and do fuck all on the opponent's turn and will almost certainly be gone by your next draw phase, meaning you won't even get to use them. And I'm not even done with this one yet, because it's not just that this is the shittiest Rhoda imaginable, and only in your end phase, but it's 2014 when this was released, and Rhoda was going to 3. 2 months after this card's debut, it went up to 2, and then up to 3 by the time the box set even dropped. It was useless in its debut format, and by the time Rhoda was limited again, this card was way too slow to be playable in a deck that was way too slow to be playable. And then there's the last effect. The prize for getting 12 names, the best effect on the card by logic of needing the most to use it, and it's Upstart. For getting every single playable Noble Knight into play, and also Gwal Shavad, probably, you get Upstart Goblin. During the end phase, good hand traps to draw in 2014 were Maxi and Effect Veiler. Beyond that, you may as well have been drawing 2 during your draw phase, because that was practically what was being applied here. And that would have been so much better than this, but we can't give them good cards. These are Noble Knights. Or at least that was apparently what was up in 2014. And again, this requires 12 different names to get this effect. What the fuck is going on in your duel that you've been through 12 Noble Knights and you still haven't declared a winner? How does that ever even happen? And all just to draw a card? Truthfully, this is a problem with this type of effect on any card. You see similar enough effects on cards like the Mech Knight field spell or the Furhire field spell, things that require you to get the most possible out of your deck. But where Noble Knights draw 1 card in the end phase, Furhire at least gets to destroy the entire board, and Mech Knight gets to send the opponent's entire hand and extra deck to the graveyard, which are insanely strong effects, but even those aren't used, because all of these effects have requirements that if you're going to get to that point, you should have already won already. You already have so much advantage over the opponent, or the duel's going on so long that it's probably not even going to meaningfully matter when it happens. Each of them asks for setup where a game is already over in 99.99999% of games, and so their effects are simply win more. Except for, of course, Noble Knights, who instead get to draw 1 card in the end phase. But I bring this up to say that I don't know what effect you could even put in this slot that would feel worth it. Blow up the field? Sure, but they probably don't have much to blow up if you've gotten through 12 names. And 1 draw feels like you're being told to run a mile so that you can get yourself a teaspoon of water. That's it? I don't really have a solution to this. I just flat out don't know if you can make this effect worth it. The easiest way to make this card more playable is, of course, to make it usable during your main phase. During your main phase, if you have this many knights, Foolish, special one. Draw an extra card. Holy shit, this card's a lot better with that, isn't it? It's such a large ask for that many names, but in my opinion, it would be infinitely better, and I don't know if you could argue otherwise. Even would have helped get the deck over its normal summon reliance, which was a very big problem. It could have been a solid card, but it's not, and instead it's just the POV of you walked in on the mayonnaise is too spicy gang. My god, what an awful joke. Okay, moving on to the modern day. This card has only gotten worse with time, becoming unplayable by the time Duelist Alliance dropped. The only recorded top this card has ever seen came in July of 2014, right before Duelist Alliance, in the state of Nevada. This is just a Noble Knight deck. There is nothing interesting to see here, except maybe that they were playing Lady of the Lake. I did that back in the day too, but that was mostly because I pulled one. I don't think that was common in Noble Knight decks, or certainly wasn't wise. Either way, the deck most certainly topped in spite of Round Table and not because of it, and I won't hear anything otherwise. Did the slowest, shittiest field spell get top 4, or did rank 4 spam in a format with 3 soul charge? You tell me. It's really a shame that it isn't better, because, for one, it's the fucking Round Table of King Arthur. It's so iconic to the lore. Why couldn't you make it good? And also, Noble Knight as a deck could really use a good field spell. They're locked out of back row, more than most decks are, since they've got that reliance on equip spells, so the field spell being a 6th slot would have really allowed them to get some more effects beyond the reliance on both Knight and Swords. These days, Noble Knights by and large have been replaced by the Infernoble Knights, because those cards don't need the equip spells to be good, the equip spells just help make them better. You know, the way the Noble Knight should have been. All Noble Knight support helps them inadvertently, and the simple fact that they were designed in 2019 makes them stronger and more consistent. And even now, with the new field spell of Camelot, which is functionally just get out round table, it still sucks. Overall, Noble Knight, the round table, is fucking dog shit. And that's our look at Yu-Gi-Oh! Single card history. Noble Knights of the Round Table. Stay tuned for our next video, or feel free to suggest some cards to review or what type of video you'd like to see. Don't forget to like, and as always, subscribe to YGO Strats to impress your smoking Italian wife and so you can become a true duelist.